Hi there everybody. So today for our drawing exercise we will be drawing a sphere using pastel. And I have a couple examples right here. So this is what the kind of thing we're going to be drawing. So let's talk about materials right away. So you see I like to use a toned paper. So that's just a paper with a color in the background. Both of these are pastel papers. However, if you do not have a pastel paper, just a plain, this one has a few smudges on it, but a piece of sketching paper is going to work out just fine. The main thing you want is something that has a little bit of a tooth to it. So a computer paper isn't going to work out very well for pastel. But just, a very general sketching paper is going to be fine. Keep in mind, this is just an exercise. This isn't meant to produce a really fine, finished quality piece of work. Along that same note, you also don't need to use a really expensive piece of pastel paper. Maybe save that pastel paper for, something more important. This is just practice. We're just learning. All right, so going along with materials, you see in each of these examples, I have 3 sort of smudges of color underneath. So the pastels we will be using today, it doesn't really matter what color, but you need a dark, a medium, and a light. You see each of these, we have dark, medium, light. So the colors I am using today, I have this dark sort of, I'll just put it down here. It's kind of a browny, purpley dark color. And then for my medium, we're using kind of a muted green. And then lastly, this light baby blue. And actually, lastly, we will be using white. So I'll bring my example back. You can see on all these we have dark, medium, light, and then the white highlight. So those are the 4 colors I'm using. Again, you get to use dark, medium, light. Hue doesn't matter. All right. We can also use, so here's my tiny piece of willow charcoal. And this is just the piece I'm using. Obviously they come bigger. But you can use either willow charcoal or just a number 2 pencil if that's something you don't have any charcoal. Something that's going to be easy to erase. And then of course, lastly, you get your eraser. This is a kneaded eraser. It's just my preference. You don't have to use a kneaded eraser. Any eraser you have on hand will work. All right, so let's get started. I've broken this into steps. So for step number 1, you get to take either your charcoal or your pencil and you draw a circle. This is the beginning of our sphere. All right, some people get freaked out about drawing circles. I guess the worst thing you can do is tense up. That's going to make, if you're tense, then you will end up with circles that have more of like, let me see if I can do it, more of this kind of a look to them. Yeah, but so you saw how I kind of practice a little bit, and then I actually put down the pigment on the page. The other recommendation I have is a lot of times, I think because we tend to write this way, we sort of anchor on our wrist. I would encourage you to try to float that wrist just a little bit so that you can use your entire arm to draw a circle. That's something that does take practice though. So no need to get discouraged if it feels weird right away. That's something that takes practice. All right, so we have our circle down. Now we get to jump into our pastels. I'm going to be starting with the darkest color, and all we're doing is we're blocking in those shapes. So I'm not going to do much blending right away. We'll be getting to that in a minute. But what I want to do is sort of block in these general crescent shapes of where these different values live in our sphere. So I put in my darkest color, now I'm moving on to my medium color. And then lastly, we get to put in the light color. I'm leaving a little spot open for white when we come to that. Okay, so I blocked in generally where those colors are living. Now we get to go through and do the fun part of blending. There are a couple ways to blend. One is by layering. This layering way of blending is something I do a lot. So if you just watch, I'm kind of coming up over with my dark color. I'm sneaking up into that medium color area. Then I can take my medium pastel and sort of sneak back down. And you can see how it's sort of softening that line between the dark and the medium areas. So layering is one way. Of course, the other way to blend colors is what people usually think of, and that's smudging, either with your fingers or with some kind of tissue paper or a sham or something. All right, so you see how we have a smoother, more gradual transition between the dark color and the medium color. So let's do that again, but this time between our medium and our light color. All right, so I can take my medium. One thing I am doing here is another reason I like the kneaded eraser is I kind of clean my fingers off on it. So my fingers do get kind of dirty as I'm squishing around in here, and I can just touch my kneaded eraser and clean them off so that then when I go in and start blending in those lighter areas, I don't have to worry as much about getting this really dark color up in here and muddying things up. Okay, so back to our blending. However, we can take this medium color, kind of sneak it up into that light area, take our light color again, and push things back down and blend by layering those colors. And then of course we can blend by smudging with our finger too. All right, let me put on this little bit of highlight here. So I'll take my white, put in that highlight, and once again we're doing the same thing, this blending. So I start by layering. I'm going to put all right. So one thing I will say is, and this is going to sound obvious, but you'll be surprised how much sometimes you forget when you're in the middle of a drawing. But it's easier to layer dark colors over light colors than it is to layer light colors over dark colors. So I just be thoughtful about how you're placing your colors, which is why when I'm initially working, and I do this with a simple thing shaped like this. I do this when I'm drawing animals or anything really. I'm kind of keeping those areas of color, those areas of value in their own separate spaces, at least at first while I block everything out. And then once it's all blocked in and I feel more comfortable with where I'm placing my color, I can start to blend it a little bit more. All right, so I'm just cleaning that up. One last thing that I would like to show you is sometimes when I've seen people do this exercise, it's really common to sort of, let me get this sphere in here. It's common to kind of flatten out those shapes. So let me show you what I mean. Place in my dark in this sort of flatter area, and then my medium and then lastly my light. But you see what I mean by these areas kind of being flattened out, whereas on this sphere over here, we get these nice big crescent shapes. Those are going to really help to make something look like it's three-dimensional. I think it fairly often I'll have students who are kind of afraid of those nice big curves, and they want things to be a little bit flatter, and then it can be kind of confusing when people are doing some really, really wonderful blending, but it doesn't quite have the same look and they're not sure why. So that might be why. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching, and happy drawing.